Comrades and friends, I've got a script this time, so hopefully be succinct. I'm speaking on behalf of Joe Flynn, General Secretary of STUC, and I'll read what he says. And the plaque we're going to unveil is to James Fearon, known in Ireland as the third James, the other two being James Larkin and James Connolly, and the unsung hero of our struggle. And this is the third plaque or monument to Fearon. There's one in Newry, the town of his birth, which was unveiled by Unite. It's on the quays in Newry. One in Liberty Hall, which is identical to this, so this is a sister plaque to the one in Liberty Hall. I'd also like to introduce, I think you all know Jennifer McClary from Glasgow Trades Council Unite, but this is Phelan Jennings, who's travelled here tonight from Newry, who's a member of the National Executive Council of STUC, and to whom a promise was made a long time ago, which we're finally fulfilling. So Phelan has been somebody campaigning for one of the great heroes of his hometown of Newry. It is with great pleasure that STUC today witnesses the unveiling of a plaque to the memory of one of our union's founding fathers, James Fearon of Newry, here in the Scottish TUC premises in Glasgow, the city of Fearon's death. On behalf of all STUC members, and especially those in Newry and Northern Ireland, the Union expresses its gratitude to the generous fraternal solidarity offered to us by the STUC and Glasgow Trades Council in accepting the placing of the commemorative plaque to Fearon in their building. In 1990, STUC, the Services Industrial Professional and Technical Union, was created by the amalgamation of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, ITGW, and Federated Workers Union of Ireland, FWI, both unions created by Jim Larkin in 1909 and 1924, respectively. The ITGW, in turn, had been a breakaway from the Liverpool-based National Union of Dock Labourers, for whom Larkin was an organiser. The NUDL, as many of you here know, had actually been formed here in Glasgow in 1889, a large portion of its membership being emigrant Irish workers on the waterfronts of the Clyde. And Michael Davitt, the Landleaguer and Socialist, an MP at the time, interceded on behalf of the NUDL in the recognition dispute from the Glasgow employers. So you might argue that STUC's origins are actually here in Glasgow, which I think is worth commenting on the day. James Fearon was born in Castle Street in Newry in July 1874, one of the 7 children of Owen Fearon and Sarah Mitten. Owen Fearon was suffocated under very suspicious circumstances in the grain mill in which he worked when the children were very young. I think Fearon himself was 5 or 6. The suspicious circumstances were considered to be a sectarian attempt on his life by pushing grain sacks onto him, and he died as a consequence. That meant that, of course, the Fearon family were raised in penury. Fearon himself, like Connolly, served a brief period in the British Army and appears to have first come to Glasgow, where he had family members, and began his life as a socialist agitator. At a later period, he meets with Larkin, about 1905-06, in Greenock, and both he and Larkin combined together to work for the National Union of Dock Labourers, and incidentally also the National Sailors and Firemen's Union. They often organised the waterfront and the waterborne workers simultaneously in Glasgow, Ardrossan, Bowness, Leith, Belfast, Newry, Warren Point, Drogheda, Cork, Dublin and Waterford. The Newry branch of the NUDL, which would now be part of Unite, was established at a meeting in Newry Town Hall on the 27th of September 1907, and Fearon was appointed secretary, as far as we know his first formal elected position. A bitter dock strike followed. Fearon's competitive style led him to be known among the employers of Newry as round the ring, and of course waterfront industrial relations then were pretty physical, and the strike was defeated by the importation of scabs and the use of violence by the police and the authorities. The Newry strike, therefore, whilst it made some advances, was effectively defeated, and Fearon, exhausted by the conflict, was hospitalised in Newry workhouse. 2 important facts there. One is that he suffered the first of a continuous series of ill health, largely due to his neglect of his own health, and the fact that it was the workhouse as an indication of the man's poverty. In 1908, he leads a second dockers strike, this time in Cork, a very, again, complicated dispute that led to, among other things, significant litigation both against himself and Larkin, and both men were imprisoned on the allegation of misappropriation of funds when the dockers union in Cork transferred to the new ITGWU. But during that strike, with the same physical forces, Fearon struck a workers' militia, and Larkin subsequently was to claim that it was the inspiration of Fearon's actions in Cork in 1908 that led to the creation of the Irish Citizen Army in 1913 as a workers' defence force, which of course became a component of the 1916 Rising. I should say at this point, incidentally, after the Transport Union was formed, it briefly had a branch here in Glasgow on the Broomielaw, and the branch secretary was a man called Sean O'Donnell, who was the brother of the very famous Irish socialist and novelist Padda O'Donnell. And that branch was largely formed amongst migratory Irish workers from Donegal and Mayo, who came across every year to work gathering the potato crop and other things in the Lothians and in the borders. Now, perhaps to recuperate from illness after his imprisonment, Fearon returns here to Glasgow and lodged with an aunt. He became involved in a thing called the Model Lodging Houses campaign, which was a campaign for what we would call affordable accommodation or just housing for working class people. The Clyde Workers Movement and the Union of Post Office Workers. Now, we don't know much other than that, but one assumes that he must have therefore worked in the post office, but we haven't, I think, been able to fully establish that. In 1920 and 21. He was also active in the National Unemployed Workers Committee, the forerunner of the more famous National Unemployed Workers Movement of the 30s, and the nascent Communist Party of Great Britain. In 1922, and again we're not entirely clear when, he returned to Ireland, joins the new Communist Party of Ireland, one of whose leading members was Roddy Connolly, the son of James Connolly, and he becomes a conspicuous figure again in the Newry Labour movement with his brother John, who's branch secretary of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union. It is not clear why Fearon then returns to Glasgow, but he did at some point in 22 or 23, and he dies on the 24th of October 1924. Now, we have accounts in Bill McCamley's pamphlet of the funeral, the red flag draping the coffin, which was described in the press as one of the largest seen in the city. And this obviously testifies to his resumed activity on Clydeside and the respect and indeed affection in which this relatively casual citizen of Glasgow was nevertheless held. What we haven't been able to find out, despite Stevie and Kirsty and various other people's best efforts, is was he buried or cremated? And we've checked, well, at least people like Steve have checked the various roles at the time. So that's something that we really do need to find, because the original ambition that Phelim had is that we would mark the grave on the assumption that it isn't marked and possibly a pauper's grave. And I think SIPTU would still be committed to that if we can establish a burial place here in the city. Addressing the Transport Workers Union of America in 1947, a union set up by Quill from Kilgarvan, County Kerry, and called the Transport Workers Union, as opposed to the Transit Workers Union, which would be the American term, and very much in a Connollyite model. Quill was a member of the CPUSA, and one of the first unions in the States to organise extensively amongst black workers and seek equal rights for black workers. At a tribute in 1947, young Jim Larkin's son, said, quote, "While we pay tribute to men like Connolly and Larkin, whose names are international and have become part of our history, let us also remember the men of the rank and file, whose names are forgotten. Men like Fearon, not only fought in the cities of Dublin and Cork, but who died in the struggle in the city of Glasgow, dying of a broken heart, worn out by the battles of his class." And Larkin therefore rightly remembers Fearon, as you see on the plaque, as one of the unsung heroes of our struggle. Now, since the Scottish TUC's foundation in 1897, the Irish Trade Union Congress, now the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, formed 3 years earlier, they have exchanged fraternal and sororal speakers each year. But as Scotland once again considers embracing independent nationhood and in the potential dangers of Brexit, Fearon would surely have seen the struggles, as he did, of the Scottish and Irish working classes as a struggle in common. It must be remembered that Fearon, Connolly and Larkin were active in labour struggle on both sides of the Atlantic, and under the increasing influence of syndicalism in their newspapers, the ITGW, the Northern Forward in Glasgow, cited material from Canada and the United States, South Africa and Australia, France, Germany and Italy. They were truly internationalist in their aspirations and understanding. In a world of globalisation and the new right, that same understanding of the need for global struggle and solidarity is imperative. To that extent, STUC is both proud and purposeful in being able to celebrate the life of an Irishman who gave equally to the cause of the Irish and Scottish working classes, who believed that the Workers' Republic, whether Irish or Scottish, was the mechanism through which those classes, in asserting their national rights through class struggle, could then unite in the cause of international freedom for the workers of the world. Far from being a utopian and outmoded idea consigned to history, Fearon perhaps lit a path that has become, unfortunately, overgrown and obscure. In erecting this plaque in his memory, he would insist that we do not pause, but pick up the banner he held so bravely and tirelessly aloft, and dedicate our lives, as he dedicated his own, to organising for class struggle, national and international solidarity. So we'll ask Jennifer and Phelan to unveil the plaque.
You go ahead.
150.
Yeah.
Can you just squeeze together? We drop in.
Over this way?
Yes, Phelan, come over so we have the plaque.
You still get the plaque over my head.
That's it. Fearon is saying on the shoulders of a giant.
Yeah.
And can I thank you on behalf of the STUC and the working people at Glasgow for this memorial. It's something we'll cherish. You've sparked a fire with the challenges to find out more about James Fearon and the contribution he made not only to the struggle in Ireland but to the struggle for working people in our city. So thank you very much for that, brother.